Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. It is 10:07 a.m. East Coast time, Monday, September 30th. It's already a busy morning. Tons of stuff going up on Patreon today. This is the third video today on YouTube. My God, what's going on, people? I'm going to be doing a recap of last week. People have been asking me about this. I figured, yeah, I got the time to do it. I'll do a quick recap of, this is the sheet from last week, position by position, where I sort of ended up. And if I thought it was a mistake on my half or something I didn't realize, or if it was just a process thing that went right and the result ended up wrong. So there's a couple spots that I really want to talk about. We'll go position by position. Hit the subscribe button if this is your first time here. This is sort of a look back, right? Look back at how the week went and kind of and a process thing that I think is important. I do this in my own time, but doing it on camera as well to help you guys out, I think is good. So we'll start with the quarterbacks. This was up front the best week that I've had yet. Out of the four, last week was my best week until this week. It was close to a 2x your money week, double your investment. It was a 1.85x, you can call it. So for every dollar I put in, I got $1.85 back on average. So it was a good week overall. Definitely take it. Definitely take any time you're not losing. Week one, small loss. Week two, pretty much a break-even type week. Week three was good, and then this week so far. So we're up in NFL through 4 weeks. Yippee! Cash games have been really good. Tournament, best week was this past week. So there's the first look video is out for this week. There is the Monday Night Football, and I'll have the picks video and some more content, obviously, throughout the week. Picks video, initial one tomorrow. So starting with the quarterbacks, yeah, I felt good about the quarterback take. If you were watching throughout the week, if you're watching on my live streams and you weren't just ducking in on a first look lineup and thinking that's where my process started and ended, if you were paying attention, I was skeptical of Russell Wilson in that passing attack as they were favorites in that game. Very skeptical of them, but still thought he was a fine play. So having him as a yes, maybe I should have changed him to an X as a maybe. I personally did not have much of Russell Wilson. Very skeptical, even in a good matchup, of that offense as a pass heavy team. And I said it on the Thursday Osmo stream and the Saturday one. I think it's a game script where Russell Wilson throws 28 to 30 times, and it's a very heavy game script more times than not. We got Russell Wilson throwing 28 times, very heavy run script, and Chris Carson coming back to life, really, for the most part, just not fumbling. So I thought that one went okay. Jared Goff, obviously, felt really good about. Phillip Rivers. I got to the most Phillip Rivers and Lamar Jacksons in my tournament / cash lineup, Phillip Rivers, but I got to the most of those two players in my tournament and cash lineups. Lamar did completely fine, over 25 fantasy points, late touchdown in garbage time, but he got loose on the ground as well. And then Phillip Rivers, just against a really bad Miami defense. Quarterbacks are going to continue to have their way against this defense for 25 plus fantasy points. So I thought those two were good. Daniel Jones would be a spot that was maybe a little bit processed. Maybe instead of being a yes, should have been an X and been a maybe. Definitely not a no. I mean, here's the thing. At his price point against the Washington secondary, that was that suspect. I think it was still the right process move. Personally, did not end up getting to Daniel Jones in cash, and personally just did not end up getting, because I had a lot of money left over. I thought it was easy to build lineups because you had Wayne Gallman, who we'll get to, being extremely cheap and viable. I didn't think you needed to pay down at quarterback as much this week. So maybe putting him as an X was the way to go to end it off. Matt Ryan, I thought was fine. Deshaun Watson, I thought was fine as an X. I think the process was fine there. And we're going to talk about Will Fuller and DeAndre Hopkins. He missed Will Fuller on a 75-yard wide open touchdown, and then he missed DeAndre Hopkins on about a 50-yard catch that potentially, if DeAndre Hopkins makes one man miss, which we know he can do, is another touchdown. So a game where the offensive line was an issue, a game where Deshaun Watson looked off. I mean, I can't throw and catch the ball for them, but I thought that spot, as always, every single week with the rushing upside of Watson, he is at least worth a maybe in that spot, especially when Dante Jackson was ruled out. So Mahomes not throwing a touchdown, I don't think. That's obviously not foreseen. Mahomes is always going to be a yes as long as he's on the board. Like the Bears defense maybe is a time where I don't want to play Mahomes, but for the most part, always going to be a yes. Goff seemed fine this week. Phillip Rivers. Russell Wilson probably at the end of the week should have been listed on that live stream before a lock on Sunday as a maybe, just because I thought the match was fantastic, but we already touched on just Seattle as a favorite historically under Pete Carroll has been a run-heavy team. 5-point favorites entering this game. Got people running down the halls with their kids in the morning. God, get control of that. So yeah, I think for the most part everything was okay, and I felt good about it. Jameis Winston would be the one spot that I would say I missed on. I just overlooked the spot. I didn't look deep enough into the Rams. As good as their secondary had been, a lot of what their secondary was really dependent on just matchups, right? You had an injured game against Cam Newton when he was injured. You had a game against Drew Brees and the Saints when they left early. So a lot of their success might have been a little bit fluky so far. We saw Jameis absolutely tear them up in that secondary. And then also another reason I got off of the Bucs was they were missing an offensive lineman again for this game, down another offensive lineman. So I got off of the Bucks really as a whole, and clearly that blew up in my face a little bit. So Jameis went just nuclear for the most part, looked fantastic. Godwin, I think he had, 4 touchdowns? Brate, Godwin, and Evans all had tutties. Godwin had 2. So just overrating, I would say, wrongfully on my part, that Rams secondary. That was a miss on my end. But for the most part, other than that, I felt good about how the week went. And Case Keenum was a no, and I didn't want to get there. Obviously, the injury, we don't know what that would have been. Kyler Murray was a quarterback that I liked in sneaky situations. I mean, the guy ends up scoring, 18, 17 fantasy points. It's not terrible when you factor in a $6,000 price tag, just relative to other quarterbacks. It's not going to get you there. So I think Jameis was the biggest quarterback miss on my end. Other than that, I felt comfortable, and the week ended up turning out right, going with Lamar Jackson and Phillip Rivers for me in most of my lineups, a little bit of Jared Goff. Running back. Running back had a relatively small player pool. I usually will have players that I liked. If you look at this, it's 6. It's 6 yeses. Overall, it's 10 guys that I have interest in. So we'll start from the top. McCaffrey, fine. The guy crushed it. 180 total yards, a touchdown. He's that whole offense right now. He was the only bright spot really in that entire game on either side of the ball. Eckler, we weren't concerned if you were watching the live stream. If you were on Patreon, we were not concerned at all about Melvin Gordon suiting up. At most, if somebody got hurt, Melvin Gordon comes in, sees 8 to 10 touches. Nobody got hurt. No Tremaine Pope getting hurt. So Eckler looked completely fine. Caught that 18-yard touchdown. Got a, goal line carry for a touchdown after that. Just went nuclear. David Johnson, we had interest in because if they're going to be playing from behind Arizona, we know that David Johnson's being used a lot more in the receiving game. That's exactly what happened. The guy caught 8 balls on 11 targets, 99 yards. Just misses that 2-point bonus for 100 yards, damn it. You couldn't get the couple more interest, David, but he looked fine. Marlon Mack was the biggest miss on my part. Now, Marlon Mack gets hurt in the second half, so he still wouldn't have gotten there. But he gets hurt in the fourth quarter, so we don't know what he actually ends up with if he gets a touchdown. So it's tough to say, but the big thing here was Oakland just got out ahead. This was a game script that Vegas didn't see coming. I think the process was completely fine here with Marlon Mack being a decent-sized, 7-point home favorite, I believe. But just Oakland gets out early. They score on the first drive, then they get right back out there. Trevor Davis has a 60-yard rush, the former Packer, and they get up 14-0. And when a team gets up 14-0, it's really bad for your running back in that situation. So Marlon Mack, a victim of game flow there. I think Marlon Mack, though, in hindsight, was still a fine play. Kerryon Johnson had a ton of interest in. Kerryon Johnson goes out there and careers it. 125 yards, gets involved in the receiving game. Love to see it. Kerryon have a fantastic day against who is still going to be, dating back to last year, the worst run defense, according to Pro Football Focus. And our man, Wayne Gallman. Man, I had 100% Wayne Gallman this weekend. Now, I don't play 150 lineups, so that's not like I was going crazy. I play cash, I play 3 maxes, I play single entries, and sometimes I play 20 max. I had 100% Wayne Gallman. Man, oh man, did that first half for Wayne Gallman just make me so happy. The dude just goes nuclear, 4,600. It's just hard to ignore a running back who is going to stay on the field, who is a pass-catching running back, and he proved me wrong. I said he was going to catch passes but not do much after the catch. He did stuff after the catch. Obviously, his touchdown catch was no one there, but I think he had a catch where he caught a ball on like a 3rd and 20 or a 2nd and 20 or something, and he got all 20 yards, and he broke a couple tackles. He stiff-armed the dude. Yeah, he looked good after the catch. He looked legit. He's a legitimate running back option moving forward. Wayne Gallman was fantastic. Mark Ingram was a maybe, and the game script ruined him. If they're not playing from a lead or ahead, Mark Ingram's kind of screwed, even though they kept giving him the ball. Leonard Fournette and Chris Carson. So I had interest in Chris Carson. I did, because if you're not going to have as much interest like I didn't in the passing game towards the end of the week, you should get more interest in Chris Carson. The reason he was marked as an X, and I said it on the live stream, was if Rashad Penny is out, I will want to play Chris Carson. If Rashad Penny is in, I will not want to play Chris Carson. I played Chris Carson in the afternoon slate. I never updated him because as of the live stream, I still had him as an X, but I felt good about the Chris Carson call. Leonard Fournette just went nuclear. Had him as a maybe. The amount of usage he was getting, I would say, keeps him as a maybe. But he just went nuclear. He had an 81-yard run, 225 rushing yards, still picked up 4 fantasy points in the air, 2 catches for 20 yards. I thought the Leonard Fournette call, having him as a yes, he graded out fantastic in projection systems. Having him as a yes, with no Derek Wolfe, a very good run stopper, might have been the correct call there. Bradley Chubb gets injured during that game, so that opens up more running waves. And then just for the most part, Leonard Fournette was just going beast mode in this game, breaking so many tackles. So I think Leonard Fournette is a maybe going into that game. Maybe you have him as a yes. Maybe that's where I miss. Marlon Mack, I don't think was a process of me just being wrong. I think it was more so a process of just the game flow. Like, that's not something you predict from Vegas, and you trust Vegas most of the time, or majority of the time. I will rely on experts in Vegas. So that one was tough. But, Wayne Gallman and Austin Eckler and Christian McCaffrey, in far majority, if not every single one of my lineups, I think every single one of my lineups had a combination of the two of those guys taking it to the promised land. And then if you were somebody who was fortunate enough to have your third running back be a Kerryon, I think I have one lineup like that, a Kerryon, a Chris Carson, and or a Leonard Fournette. Fournette being probably the big one. Congrats to you. Devonta Freeman, I thought was a maybe. I thought he was a maybe if Ito Smith was out, and It was a good spot for him. He got involved in the receiving game. Devonta Freeman, though, I would be trading him in your season-long leagues. This guy on the ground looks terrible. He did good in the receiving game. That's it. Don't be fooled by the stat box and just the total fantasy points. On the ground, 12 carries, 28 yards. He can't break any tackles. He's getting just destroyed in the backfield. And Atlanta lost 2 more offensive linemen. So some of it's his fault. Some of it's there's nobody there. They're down 4 offensive linemen, maybe 5 now. Just terrible. The main miss, I would say, so Dalvin Cook got involved in the receiving game, but at his price tag, he still didn't pay it off, in my opinion, in the matchup. I don't think that is anything wrong. I think he was still a no in terms of playing him. I would say my main miss was probably on Nick Chubb, but I think it's still fine in the process. You're facing a Baltimore team that came in top 5 against the run, and you're facing them in a spot where they're considered favorites. What we saw from Cleveland was not expected. Cleveland came out in very heavy 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets, which is clearly very favorable for running backs. You have Nick Chubb breaking off an 80-plus yard touchdown, something that you don't really project either. So I would say the biggest thing I missed was having Nick Chubb as a no. He probably should have stayed as a maybe, had him there earlier in the week. Ended up liking Fournette and Carson over him, which I think was still fine. Obviously, the 3 touchdowns is what sways it. Touchdowns a little bit variant. So Nick Chubb should not have been a no. He should have been an X and continued as an X as a maybe. I think the process was okay there, though, in terms of filtering down a player pool in the 6K range. I like Marlon Mack more, David Johnson, Leonard Fournette, and probably Chris Carson. So he should have probably been an X if I have to look back and I have to do it again. But I would say that we had no indication that this team was going to run a ton of 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets, which obviously, like we said, favors running backs. So I think that's the spot I got wrong. Dalvin Cook I feel fine with. Todd Gurley I feel fine with. Nothing really down here that I feel bad about. Josh Jacobs still getting 19 touches in a game where they jump out to a big lead but doesn't do much with them overall. I feel good about it. Sony Michel, something to note is that he saw 17 of 19 running back touches, which is something that we were not seeing, especially James Devlin, surprising. So I would say so far biggest miss was probably Jameis at quarterback, and honestly I feel good about running back. Nick Chubb was a miss just because he ends up with 3 touchdowns, but I was not expecting 12 personnel, and nor really was anybody. So I think this went pretty fine. Wide receiver obviously is huge. I mean, this is just a long list. So you have Atlanta just looking just gross on offense. Like they have a ton of passing yards. Austin Hooper does well. Sanu does well. But you saw blanket coverage from the Titans, which hurt Julio and hurt Calvin Ridley. Also, these are just filtered by I think like name. It's not filtered by like any rankings in terms of Julio being my number 1. Keenan Allen is a fine process move there. He just does not have as great of a day. The running backs do their thing. Dontrell Inman has a good day before getting hurt. And for the most part, Xavier Howard locked up Keenan Allen, which I wasn't expecting. So I think that's a fine process thing, maybe looking more into the shadow coverage, but I tried as best as I could. And I wasn't expecting a full-on shadow coverage for Keenan Allen in the slot. Sammy Watkins, I think, is still a fine move in that matchup, just doesn't get into the end zone. I think that we have to start considering Sammy Watkins in the slot. Yes, it's fantastic for good wide receivers to go into the slot, but I have to start considering more, is it fantastic in this Chiefs offense where the deep ball is obviously as highly effective as a slot wide receiver, and the deep ball is probably even more upside when Patrick Mahomes is throwing you it because it's probably some of the most accurate deep balls, if not the most accurate in the league. Cooper Kupp continued to go on a tear. Tyler Lockett, I said this on the stream. Tyler Lockett was a good play on his own, but in terms of getting to more Tyler Lockett, I wasn't going to. He probably should have been marked as a maybe to end that stream or on that stream, just because I did not have as much upside in Seattle as a favorite. We saw Lockett have a pedestrian game, I think 4 catches, 50-something yards. Larry Fitzgerald, the whole Arizona offense just kind of struggled. Larry Fitzgerald showing his floor at about 9.7 fantasy points. I thought that was fine. Sterling Shepard has a good day, a decent day, 7 catches in the 70s. Moving forward, though, Golden Tate, no real interest there. Christian Kirk gets hurt with a bad ankle injury, so really hard to evaluate how he would have done. DK Metcalf just doesn't show up. Again, that's the concern about the passing game for Seattle is when they're favorites. Do you really want to go there even in a favorable matchup? I would say moving forward, no. Preston Williams has a decent game, especially for 3,900. I think he had like 4 catches for close to 50 yards. A game where he saw more Casey Hayward than I thought. Devontae Parker did not see a full shadow of Casey Hayward, which I guess in retrospect makes sense. In hindsight, I should have looked into that more if Devontae really would have seen a full-on shadow treatment of Casey Hayward, which he did not. Marquise Brown, I said it on the stream, best point per dollar play. Marquise Brown just got taken away. Even with no Denzel Ward, even with no Morgan Burnett, even with no Greedy Williams, they forced all their attention in the safety coverage over the top to Marquise Brown. You turn Baltimore into a very one-dimensional team. Short passes, making Lamar rely on his legs, and you stop the run, which Cleveland has done well this year. Marquise Brown was probably my biggest wide receiver miss. I ended up putting him in everything that I had, pretty much almost every single one of my 3 maxes, except I put him in like 2/3 of my 3 max lineups. I didn't put him in cash because he's still a boomer bust play down the field for the most part. Will run intermediate routes. Caught 4 balls for like 22 yards, 6.2 fantasy points, not enough. So that's on me. I was very high on him for obvious reasons. When you have 3 of the 4 or 3 of the 5 starting defensive backs down for a team, It's my cousin just texted me. When you have 3 of the 5 starting defensive backs down for a team, it's a very favorable spot to put the best wide receiver, who's a burner, but also running Chris Sprouts in at 5,800. So I think that was fine in the process. I would do that again. If a good wide receiver, number 1 in an offense, who has deep threat ability but also runs nice routes, is facing a secondary that just is down 3 defensive backs. We saw the Rams pick them apart the last week. I'll probably do that again. DeAndre Hopkins, we said 50-yard catch, just missed, changes his day. Will Fuller was the right move. When Dante Jackson went out, this is still the right move in hindsight. He missed a 75-yard touchdown because Deshaun Watson overthrew him by about 2 yards. Wide open. Like, if you look at the replay, you're going to get sick, because I'm going to get sick, because I ended up getting Will Fuller in about a third of my 3-max lineups, a lot of them. And instead of having a very, very mediocre day, he would have had like 100 yards and a touchdown and had a smash day in the amounts of like 20-plus fantasy points. It was a wide-open 75-yard touchdown, just dropped. Can't catch the ball for him. Terry McLaurin was an X, but then he was ruled out. So, I mean, obviously he was a no. LaMarcus Robinson was a maybe. I think still as a maybe in the process is okay. Calvin Ridley was a maybe. Probably should have been a no. I mean, he had a good one-on-one matchup against Butler, but I wasn't expecting blanket coverage on him as well. They had blanket coverage on Julio and Calvin Ridley, so they pretty much said, beat us with Austin Hooper, beat us with Mohamed Sanu in your running game. We know you can't run on us. And that's what happened. They threw a ton of passes to Austin Hooper. He had a great game. He seems like a top 7 tight end right now. And then they threw a ton of passes to Mohamed Sanu in a tough matchup. But I mean, when they're giving you that shadow coverage on the short routes, they played very much so like a zone defense in this one. Trey Quinn, injuries to his starting quarterback's hard to judge. Jarvis Landry, I really wanted to make Jarvis Landry a yes. So Baltimore has real struggles against slot cornerbacks because Tavon Young is injured. He's done for the year. He's not playing this year. Neck injury, really scary one. Jarvis Landry had a career day, then gets hurt with a concussion. So feel good about that. Maybe I should have pushed him up to a yes. Don Shulman had a fine day before getting hurt. Odell is an X. Got shut down by Marlon Humphreys. But if you were watching on the live stream, I said if Odell is playing, it's similar to what I said about Chris Carson having an X. If Marlon Humphreys is playing because he was questionable, I won't have interest in Odell. That's a really tough matchup. I think Marlon Humphreys is the 3rd best cornerback in the league behind Jalen Ramsey and behind Stephon Gilmore. If Marlon Humphreys is out, yeah, all the Odell in the world. So that's why he stayed as an X on this one. After this, I think I ended up putting Robert Woods as a no, so that's a big no on my part. That's probably my biggest miss. I ended up putting Robert Woods as a no and just going with right here. So Robert Woods was the biggest no. On the Saturday Awesemo show, I said I liked Robert Woods as the next best option, obviously outside of Cooper Kupp. Kupp still having a fantastic day, 100 yards and a touchdown. Woods going nuclear. But a lot of this is overinflated. 68 pass attempts for Jared Goff. So a lot of it's overinflated. 15 targets for Kupp, 15 targets for Woods. So in terms of the order that I wanted them in, it ended up panning out for this game. Well, maybe not the exact order, right? Woods was probably the better play. He didn't score a touchdown, but he had a lot of receptions, more yardage. But Kupp and Woods right there in terms of usage. So I think Kupp was definitely a fine play. Probably should have had Robert Woods. I had him as an X midweek. I probably should have kept him there. Emmanuel Sanders and Cortland Sutton, if you watched it on the stream, I said that Emmanuel Sanders and Sutton were better plays, and I would be getting to more Emmanuel Sanders, not Sutton, if indeed Jalen Ramsey missed. Late in the day, Jalen Ramsey misses. Sutton scores 2 touchdowns, but Sanders is the one in terms of the yardage and overall usage who sees more of it. But Sutton looks really, really good. Whenever they have favorable matchups, those 2 wide receivers are going to look good. I made Kenny Golladay a no late because I was a little bit scared about Matthew Stafford's injury. This is probably another spot I missed on offense. Matthew Stafford, they said before the game that he was having the worst injury, I think, in his hip or whatever it was, that he's ever had in his career, and he's as close to missing a game as he ever was. He was going to play, but he's as close to missing a game as he ever was in his career. That gave me a little bit of concerns about Kenny Golladay overall. I ended up getting away from Kenny Golladay and Chris Godwin. So this is probably the biggest thing for me to take away from this week. Chris Godwin goes off. I loved him. First look lineup, he made it. I loved him early in the week. Then he pops up Wednesday on the injury report. Okay, maybe it's just an injury Wednesday stuff. They don't let guys practice. They just kind of mark them out. They give guys a day off if they feel anything off. Doesn't practice Thursday, limited on Friday. Game time decision. So I think if players practice on Friday at all, and they're going to suit up, and they're in a favorable spot, somewhat favorable. Godwin had a huge mismatch in the slot for his matchup that I think I'm going to have to start taking just the overall fact that they're playing and suiting up a lot heavier than what they did on Wednesday and Thursday. So for me, him not practicing pretty much throughout the week except a little bit on Friday was a red flag that I didn't want to get away from, even though he was going to suit up. Same thing would have happened with Terry McLaurin. He didn't play, so we don't see the result for that. I wouldn't have played as much McLaurin. I got away from a lot of Godwin, had a little bit, but not enough. So Godwin was a mistake on my end. I think that I have to stop looking a little bit too much at those injury reports on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, especially Wednesday, Thursday, and a lot more on what happens on Friday and where he's trending towards the game. I thought it was scary for a wide receiver having that groin/hip injury, but he ended up just murking. And that's about it. I felt good about fading the Indy wide receivers outside of T.Y. Hilton. That worked out pretty well. I said Allen Robinson was a sneaky play at wide receiver. He ends up having like 77 catches for 70 yards, so sneaky play, okay for the price point. And that's really it. So Dorsett, I said not to have any Dorsett or Josh Gordon. Gordon would be shadowed, didn't do much outside of a 31-yard catch. Dorsett, 2 catches for 9 yards on 9 targets. Not doing much there. So biggest misses for me were really injury related. Kenny Golladay due to his quarterback being injured. Chris Godwin due to his own hip injury. I kind of got away from those players. They end up having good games, especially Chris Godwin. So that's a mistake on my end. And then I think Will Fuller is one that might look like a mistake, but no Dante Jackson and a 75-yard touchdown. I'm still dreading that. That bumps my ROI from like a 1.85x week to like who knows what, like a 5x week. Jesus Christ, the 3 max lineup, instead of finishing in like the top 200, probably finishes in like the top 50, 20. So Seattle passing game, end of the day for Seattle, should have probably made Metcalf an X. I feel confident in the process making Tyler Lockett a Y still, even looking back at it. Tight ends, I had a small player pool. Travis Kelce, always a guy who's in play. Evan Ingram, obviously always a guy in play, played fine. Darren Waller, I thought Darren Waller, he was that one dude. I thought he had a good week. 7 catches, 8 targets, 50-something yards, I believe. He had 5 catches in like the first quarter. But Oakland got up big and they started to run the ball. They ran 19 or 17 times with Jacobs after that point. This was Washington got involved a little bit. This was just a game where they didn't need to pass. They didn't need to pass until late in the fourth quarter when the Colts kind of made it close. And then you saw like another 2 receptions for Darren Waller. So Waller moving forward is going to be a stud tight end. He's on pace for like 130 receptions right now. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I think those were fine with the process. Delaney Walker I thought was fine with the process. The only thing that happened here though, why Delaney Walker didn't have a big week, so they put their run blocking tight ends in. They got up early. Did anybody really see them getting up 14-0 or whatever it was really early against 21 to like 7, 21 to 3, whatever it was against the Falcons? I personally did not. So I thought Delaney Walker was a fine play. I think next week he's going to be an even better play because people are going to say, oh, Delaney Walker had a bad week. He just wasn't on the field because they had blocking tight ends in because they got up big, and then Derrick Henry ran the ball fucking 27 times, right? Will Dissly was an X. Only reason I was getting away from him. Only reason he wasn't a Y. He was a Y for cash games, if you wanted to ask that. Only reason, if you saw my tiers, I think he made tier 2. Only reason he wasn't a yes overall was the ownership factor for tournaments. Ended up having a nice game, right? 70 yards and a touchdown, I think it was, or 7 catches, 50 yards and a touchdown. He seems pretty solid overall in the offense. Mark Andrews was a guy I missed on, got away from him. Ends up having 8 targets, ends up scoring another touchdown. Really, truly, maybe the actual number 1 ahead of Hollywood Brown out there in terms of the passing game. So I missed on Mark Andrews. Austin Hooper, I would say I missed on, but it's a little bit inflated because this Tennessee team is very strong against tight ends, but they played a different game plan this week. They said, we're going to do, when you have 2 good wide receivers like Calvin Ridley and Julio, we're going to play more blanket coverage, give you the middle of the field like a zone defense does, like the Colts, which Austin Hooper just played last week, and you saw a similar result. Austin Hooper targeted a ton, but you also have to keep in mind that Matt Ryan threw 53 times or something in this game. I had him projected more so throwing around like 36, so when you have 17 more targets to go around, Austin Hooper's targets probably get inflated by about 3 or 4 in that game. So in terms of hindsight, I think keeping him as a no is fine, especially when you have guys similarly priced or cheaper like Will Dissly. Nothing else out here really stands out for tight ends. So I think Austin Hooper, Mark Andrews was the one I say I missed on the most. Cleveland really good against the tight end. Overall held him down, but he still got in the end zone. Probably should have been an X. I still feel fine not wanting to get back to Austin Hooper this week. Was not expecting blanket coverage in that game. So tight ends feel good. So I think the main points as we go through, and I think this is pretty good to just do in general for everybody. I think overreacting to Matt Stafford's injury, I probably would have had more Detroit stacks. But is it an overreaction? I guess that's a question I can ask for you guys and girls is, if a quarterback pops up late in the week on an injury report or a wide receiver like Terry McLaurin did, and only all you hear the day of is negative things about how bad that injury is, do we really trust him to be fully healthy and perform the way he did? I guess that's the question that I have to take away and ponder moving forward. Other than that, quarterback felt pretty good. Probably should have made Russell Wilson an X on that live stream, but wanted to make sure that he still stayed up there as a good cash play. Running backs, main miss was Nick Chubb. They ran a lot more 12 personnel. Was not expecting that, so I don't think that's a process mistake there. Marlon Mack I don't think is a process mistake either. Chubb probably should have been an X. Mack I still think is a Y. Just a totally different game script. They really, I should have weighted heavier how bad that offense would have been without T.Y. Hilton. I would say that's my main mistake for how that one kind of came out. Wide receivers, lots of options here. I think that overall We talked about Kenny Golladay. We talked about Chris Godwin. I would say those are my biggest misses at the wide receiver position, and really were injury driven, which is kind of annoying. Emmanuel Sanders and Cortland Sutton, they have their no's on this, but I said that they would be good plays and more so like X's to yeses for Emmanuel Sanders if indeed Jalen Ramsey missed, because then you have Boye on Sutton, you have Emmanuel Sanders against a third string cornerback, and that's always a good matchup for him. So Keenan Allen, definitely not a mistake on many people. That's a fine process move against Miami, a terrible defense, right? Back the slot cornerback Jamal Wiltz was out. Guys seeing on average just ridiculous targets a game. It's really just hard to predict that happening. What happened to Keenan Allen this week, and then tight ends, nothing major here. Probably should have had Mark Andrews as an X, and maybe looked a little bit more into Austin Hooper's matchup, although the matchup on the surface looked bad. So that's where I'm at. Hopefully this video helps. It's sort of just a recap of last week. We have it out. The first look's out. Monday Night Football videos out. We'll be moving forward now to the NFL Week 5. Hopefully this helps you maybe. Definitely helps me. I thought the week went really well. Maybe it's a easier week to start on when you have a good week. So maybe if I have a bad week, fingers crossed we don't, it'll be more to kind of work through in terms of like a process mistake. So yeah. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button. You can check out down below. There's merch down below, my Patreon, some free strategy guides. And yeah, I will be back tomorrow with more videos. I'll be in Awesome stream at 11 a.m. My name's Sal. You already know that. Peace out, gang. Hey, hold up. 1 second. Check out this page. If you haven't yet subscribed, hit the subscribe button, all right? And if you're interested in Patreon, if you're not already a Patreon, you can hit that button on Patreon. Become a Patreon. It will take you right there. You can also check me out on Twitter at SalVetriDFS. And hey, if you're interested, this next video that's about to pop up, why don't you check it out as well. See ya.